on mute. Oh, to keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. That way we can kind of minimize background noise. If you want to ask something, Zoom has a digital hand that you can raise up with which you can ask questions or comments. So this symposium was kind of something that we wanted to do for a long time, because of course the goal of Living Library has always been to combat prejudice, to help people open their minds more to different types of people, lifestyles, identities, you name it. And we were really curious to know if we were actually doing what we were hoping to do. And we have 4 really amazing researchers that recently did research with Living Library on different aspects of Living Library, which is how this symposium came to be. They will, of course, present their research today, which is likely when most of you are here. And as a beautiful side effect of that, we gather a wonderful, really large group of people that are all invested and interested in the Living Library and what it has to offer. So we think it might be a really good way to get connected and talk to each other. So we have high hopes, as you can hear. When it comes to Living Library, I think diversity has always been on the foreground of this company and this initiative, which is something you can really see today as well. We have a big diversity in visitors. We have people from America, some from South Africa, some calling from Germany. Our researchers, of course, are also diverse in nationalities. And this is something we see in our volunteers and our living books as well. And something we are really proud of. So it's really nice to see that diversity mirrored in this this symposium. I will very quickly pull up a little sheet for you so I can take you through what we're going to be doing this evening. Firstly, we're in the introduction. Martijn, also from Living Library, will also say a quick word. Then Öykü will talk about the impact of Living Library. Lilja will talk about perception change. Leia will talk about Living Library in primary schools. And Charissa will talk about a process evaluation she did about Living Library. After which we will have a panel discussion with our researchers. And after that, there is an opportunity to get into breakout rooms in different groups with people you are interested in or want to talk more about, so we can get connected with each other and hopefully learn from each other. So let me take it back here so I can see all your faces. So very quickly, that's what's going to happen today. Once again, please stay muted unless you are speaking so we can minimize background noise. If anyone has a question, please use the digital hand that you can use with Zoom. So I can call on you and invite you to ask your question. After each researcher is finished talking, there's an opportunity to ask them questions. So be curious because they have a lot of interesting things to tell you. For now, I really want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to give the floor to Martijn, the founder of Living Library Netherlands, to tell you some more about Living Library.
Yes, thank you very much, Eva. Yes, so my name is Martijn. I'm founder and director of Living Library Netherlands, and I will just use some 5 minutes to talk about the work we are doing, so you understand also how we work, because in some countries it might be a little bit differently, but then you understand a little bit what we are doing. First, I should say a little bit about my background is that I studied history in Groningen, and I started there an organization to combat prejudices. And what we were doing was mostly organizing international trainings with funding from Erasmus+, and then we usually came together with a big group of students, young people, learning from each other, basically coming a whole week together, and that was all sponsored. So that was quite beneficial, and I like that a lot, but we were always missing a good local initiative to actually combat prejudices. Then I saw for the first time in Istanbul, the Living Library. And then I thought, okay, this is it. This is what I should organize. This is what I've been looking for, because it brings people together in such an easy way, but yet also so effective. At least that is what I thought. And basically with some other students, I asked the library in Groningen if they could host our initiative. And some people who work there, they're always in for some kind of crazy new initiatives, and they allowed it. So we did it there. And then the next year and the year after, they started to help us more. They started to say, do you need something? Do you need t-shirts? Should we print something for you? Can we help you with the promotion? Do you need lunches? And then more and more it became more of an event that we organized together, up to the point that other libraries also started asking us, hey, can you also do this for us? Can you organize a living library for us? And we said, yeah, nice, but it takes quite some time, and we were all doing it voluntarily as part of that organization. But then they said, yeah, well, you have to ask for invoices. So it kind of became my work to spread the Living Library everywhere in the Netherlands, and now it takes place regularly, basically weekly, at some library in the Netherlands. So we have been having quite some growth, and by that we also, of course, started to have the need for some scientific evaluation of the things that we were doing. All right, so then just shortly, how we work. In a library, people come to the library, and then there's in the front a promoter. That promoter is inviting people to read today a living book instead of a real book. And at the desk, people have to register. They can say, at this big screen, they can see the books that are available. So, for example, you see them there, transgender person, person with autism, ex-convict, etc. You can say which book you want. A volunteer will get the book. You sit together with the book, reads, the rules are being read out loud. For example, you can ask each other any question, but both also have the right not to answer a question. Conversation then starts. It's 20 minutes, optionally 10 minutes longer, and a volunteer takes care of the time. Afterwards, there is an evaluation conversation with the reader, and a book is again available for a new conversation. So in that way, we are open usually 3.5, 4 hours, usually on a Saturday in a public library. And yeah, these days we also go more and more to companies and to schools. And then we work in a little bit of a different way, because then there is a central introduction where we explain shortly what is a living library, why we organize it, and then people choose together a living book, and then they have a conversation with the living book in groups of maximum 5 readers per book. And then the conversation is a little bit longer. We do 30 minutes plus optionally 10 minutes extra. Then there is a short break, and then usually there is a second conversation. So the readers have 2 conversations in groups with maximum 5 readers per book. And then finally, we do an evaluative talk, kind of a reflection, because people fill out an evaluation form. And then we can also ask the people some questions like, how was it and what have you learned, basically. So that's the same for companies and organizations and for schools, because later we will also talk a bit more about primary schools. In that respect, we work the same, except that beforehand, there's also a working book that we have developed and that students or pupils can fill out. And then we work with people from the age, like from 10 years of age on. All right, so that's kind of how we work. And what is maybe good to know about the scale is, for example, I checked the annual report from 2022, is that we back then organized 51 living libraries. There were like 2,124 conversations. We were in 34 libraries, 4 festivals, 2 schools, 11 companies. And then this year we will do quite a lot more, actually, because I think this year we already have been to 15 schools and some more companies, and I think also more libraries. So that is quite interesting how we are developing, I think, in that sense. Finally, I should want to thank Europe Direct, which is an institution from the European Union, and they have been a good sponsor of us for the living library in the school, and also for the living libraries in the public libraries, and they have supported this a lot, and they want to let you know that the European Union is really a partner in combating prejudices. Like equality is a very fundamental thing to the European Union, and that is also something I really underline based on their work and how we work with them. Yeah, thank you very much. Back to you, Eva.
Thank you, Martijn. All right, so next we'll get into the individual presentations of our researchers, and they will each speak for 10 minutes, after which there will be 5 minutes for questions for the researcher. So first up is Öykü, and she will speak on the impact of a living library. So Öykü, take it away.
Thank you, Eva. Hi, everyone. A little bit about myself. My name is Öykü. I have studied in Radboud University in Nijmegen. I completed my bachelor's in psychology there and also did my master's in behavior change. Shortly after, of course, I did my master's thesis on living library and its impact on attitudes. I will quickly attempt to share my screen with you. I think it is working. Yeah. So I also had to hand in a report, and I adjusted that as a presentation as it helped me get back in touch with the thesis a little bit. So bear with me. So basically, my research specifically focused on the improvement of attitudes after the Living Library event. So I evaluated Living Library as a behavioral intervention to improve attitudes, which are, of course, important for prejudices towards minority groups and other discriminated groups. And because of my program, I also had to include a behavioral component, which I chose to measure the intention to spread gained insights from the conversation, which is whether people were intending to tell others what they've learned from their experience the week that followed. And I measured this by a survey that I sent a week later. So there were some other variables I measured. I will go through them very quickly to give you the whole picture. Only some of them proved to be important later on. So intergroup anxiety, which refers to the feel of unease one might feel when interacting with an out-group member. So for example, when interacting with a transgender person. Empathy and perspective taking, which refers to the ability the individual has to empathize and take the perspective of the group member. And social distance, which concerns how much they want to be socially affiliated with a member. So if they want to have a refugee as a neighbor, as a co-worker, as a friend, etc. Knowledge was just the amount of knowledge the individual already had about the group, or how it changed after the conversation. And we also asked people how they experienced the conversation, since a positive experience is important for the impact. And of course, the intention, whether people were planning on sharing what they have learned with others in the coming week. The study design was as follows. So I collected data on 4 events in 4 different cities. And normally when people give a pre-questionnaire and a post-questionnaire, so when they give ask people questions before and after the conversation, they usually do it to the same individual. But I wanted to have a comparison group, and because I had a deadline and limited amount of events, I did it as such. So basically, during one event, I gave some people only the pre-questionnaire, which they filled in right before they had the conversation. So they knew which book they were going to read, and they answered the questions about that book. And some of the participants only after they had the conversation about the book they have already spoken to. So neither of the groups got like the other survey, but they both received a follow-up measure to see if they have spread the experience and whether if there was any changes in any of the other variables. All in all, there was 78 responses, which was pretty good. And with follow-up, there was a bit less because this is just the case in research. If you know, people usually don't really respond as much if you send just another measure sometime later after already the initial processing has happened. But it was still 48% or so, so that was pretty good. And so the findings, the most important one was that having a conversation with a book did improve the attitudes towards that book. So, for example, if they spoke to a Syrian refugee, then it is likely that after having the conversation, they were more positive about Syrian refugees in general. And we referred that because of the difference between people who filled in the survey before the conversation and after the conversation. So after the conversations, the scores were significantly higher on attitudes. Next, we also found that the conversation also helped with the anxiety people feel towards the book they interacted with. And this in turn also improved the attitudes. So if the anxiety was already decreased after the conversation, then it was more likely for these people to have improved attitudes towards the social group also. It is also important to note here that I did not focus on a specific social group or several, since the groups in Living Library are quite diverse. So all the questions were about the specific book the individual interacted with. And it was obvious that there was some sort of relief in anxiety and in turn positive attitude improvement. Some other findings to note were that the other variables did not really have an influence on the relationship between the conversation's effect and the attitudes. And also the conversation itself did not have a direct influence. So it did not significantly increase empathy, for example. However, the social distance, so the need to, or like feeling the affiliation, social affiliation, that was decreased a week later compared to people who filled in the survey after the conversation. So there was some effect there. And there also, because of the low responses in the follow-up questionnaires, we did not see a significant effect of attitude changes in the following week, but although not significantly, the scores were at a higher rate. So people did seem to have more positive attitudes. However, we cannot conclude that this is the case since the effect itself was not significant statistically. So all in all, what we learned from my research is that Living Library is an impactful intervention on a way to combating prejudices because it improves attitudes, and the already positive attitudes can even be improved more so. And additionally, it was interesting to find that it also helps with the anxiety that is experienced when contacting social group that is not normal, that you would not normally come across in your daily life, which Living Library is a great help with that. And with the spreading gained insights, there was also not a significant relationship. So although people did say they were intending to share the gained insights, sometimes they did, sometimes they did not. So we did not find an interesting finding there either. But it was still all interesting to note on and to confirm Living Library's impact, as other studies did in our own way. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, I believe we have 5 minutes now.
Correct. Yes. Thank you so much, Öykü. Exactly what she said. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you to ask her your question. I see Ivan has his hand raised. Go ahead.
So I want to ask about not specifically this study, but in general, like to brainstorm about the impact of Living Library and to think about some aspect that I think is quite important, is that the contact theory that kind of is behind the Living Library approach, it makes an assumption that there should be like some sort of supporting context, a context that makes this contact to have a positive impact on the person. And then I understand that your study is from the same kind of context. It was an event in the library, but I'm thinking what kind of impact does the different context, maybe in a school, in an educational context, maybe in a situation where a reader comes to not kind of work towards the same goal, but maybe they come to kind of confirm their superior attitudes that are more correct. I think like maybe what kind of role the context plays in the impact. But thank you very much for sharing your study. And it was all very interesting. I just thought maybe you have some more ideas on that.
You mean the different effects in different contexts? Yeah, so my research, of course, only focused on the events that were in a public setting. One was outdoors and the others were basically in a public library. But there are other research looking into, for example, at secondary schools as an intervention, or at universities. In Martijn, I believe, also did it in police schools and detective schools, for example. And they can lead to different motivations and different findings. Because, like, for example, one study with adolescents, there was more also peer pressure involved in improving the attitudes. So that's also an interesting finding. Our group sample was quite diverse in that sense. So it is hard to conclude one thing, and the context is, and the groups are quite general as well. But there are other living library studies like which focus on specific contexts and find specific reasonings that led to more of an impact.
All right, thank you, Ivan, and thank you, Öykü. I see Martijn has his hand raised.
Yes. Öykü, you have been sitting at either the desk or at the evaluation table, and you have people have been filling out these evaluation forms. Did it match with what you actually saw? Because you also spoke with the readers, you saw them maybe coming back after a conversation. Was it like similar, or was it like different, or how do you interpret that?
You mean different from my observations during? It was, of course, most of the questions were about the book itself, and that is hard to infer since I didn't really get to observe the conversations one-on-one. But they had a lot of comments about the events or the questionnaire itself. Actually, some found it to be didn't really get why certain questions were being asked, and sometimes were frustrated. And I, of course, don't know personally who answered what, but I think that might have led to maybe some more negative answers. But all in all, everyone experienced it as a positive thing, the conversation itself and the event itself. So that seemed to, of course, led to more positive attitudes and more positive impact. So I guess it is in that sense, I would say.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Martijn. I was also wondering that, so that's interesting. Insider's view of things. Does anyone else have a short question for Öykü? See a thumbs up?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to do the hand raise, so I'm sorry about that. I had a question around your last finding, which was about the people not spreading the sort of the learning that they had gleaned from the actual event. So in what sort of context would you expect someone to do that realistically? So I guess with the Living Library, you have people who may not come together sort of usually. And so what sort of situations were you expecting them to then go from that meeting and that conversation to share their learnings? I'm really interested in that.
Basically, in the survey we sent a week later, we asked whether people have talked to anyone about the experience at all, how often they did this, and what they talked about out of interest. We focused on whether they did it or not, of course, for practicality reasons, also because it's a quantitative research. But it's basically anyone who told their mom about it. It's like, oh, I talked to an autistic person today, and I thought this and this. But as it turns out, they usually deal with it like this. Like that is an example of sharing their insights. So we were just wondering if people were intending to do this and whether that actually correlated with their actual behavior of doing it. And we did not find a significant relationship. But depending on the answers, a lot of people do share because it is, of course, also an interesting experience. And that's also why we picked it, because it would be the most easiest to ask about and measure.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Julia, I'm afraid we're out of time for Öykü, but at the end of the event, after all the researchers have presented, you can ask her more questions, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Just trying to keep us on schedule. All right, up next is Lilja, and she will talk about perception change from Living Library. So good luck, Lilja.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Like Eva said, my name is Lilja Kanerva. I'm originally from Finland, but I've been living in the Netherlands now for the last 5 years. I have a background in cultural anthropology and development sociology. And now I just graduated from a gender studies master's. And as part of the master's, I conducted thesis research on the Living Library. I will also try to share my screen so we can start discussing it. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So like I said, as part of my gender studies master's, I did a research on the Living Library, and for me, as my study choices have been very societally oriented, the Living Library was, it seemed like a natural choice for me to do my research on. I put a quote on the slides. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to... Can you hear me?
You're freezing a little bit, Lilja.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Wi-Fi is not the strongest. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. I cross my fingers. And if you can't hear me, just shout something.
All right.
So the quote is, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." So that's really the starting point for my research. And I will tell you a little bit more about it. So what did I do and why? I was really interested in looking at what happens in the Living Library intervention regarding perception change. So unlike Öykü, who was really measuring the impact, for me, it was most interesting to see what happens when the living book and the reader speak to each other. So I sort of took for granted that there is some kind of impact and that other researchers have also shown it, but I wanted to know why perception is changed, why prejudice is being reduced. And I did it through the following 3 research questions. The main research question was, how can the living library intervention act as a catalyst for perception change? And the sub-questions, how do the readers perceive interpersonal relations during and after the dialogue? And also, how do the living books experience and negotiate their position as the so-called other? My goal was, so there has been a lot of quantitative measuring-based research, and I really wanted to bring another side, more this human side from my research. So I wanted to do a qualitative, in-depth feminist research. And why I wanted to do that is that my study, the gender studies, it's very good at critiquing society, but sometimes it feels like it doesn't provide many answers. And I really wanted to get into what can we do for all the injustice that is happening. And that's why I chose to do this study. Like I mentioned, I did qualitative study, so I conducted interviews, participant observation, and a literature review. And my starting point was this feminist lens, which considers knowledge as situated. And what this means is that knowledge is not out there somewhere in the atmosphere just floating around and transcending everything, but knowledge is always situated. It's always context dependent and space dependent, time dependent. And me as the researcher, I'm part of producing that knowledge. A few limitations. I think Öykü also mentioned this, but yeah, there is quite some time pressure with these projects. So that made it difficult for me to have a large sample size. So I interviewed 7 people. And obviously, societal phenomena, they're also hard to quantify and measure. So that makes it challenging. But yeah, let's move to hopefully the more interesting part. So what did I find then in these interviews? I will give a short overview and then I will dive into a few aspects a little bit more. So basically what I found from both the living books and the readers was that the living library, the dialogue is really seen and felt as a place that can bridge differences through dialogue. This was the main finding, so it's really much confirming what has been said, but I will dive into why this happens. A few challenges that I found when it comes to the living library reducing prejudice were the bias of openness and the readers choosing familiar books. I will quickly speak about that as well. And then there were 2 unexpected findings, which arose from the previously mentioned challenges. And those were feelings of connectedness and feelings of peer support. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. One of my participants said, I think this model carries in it the potential to, in these polarizing times, construct bridges, to enter into a dialogue that may not otherwise know each other and that would otherwise not get in touch. So basically just the mere design of the living library is already something, because it brings people who would otherwise not meet each other. So this is quite perhaps intuitive. The second finding I found also quite interesting. I called it humanizing encounters. So another participant of mine stated, it's somehow surprising how evident and blunt it is. But once you talk to people, you just like see the whole issue or topic in such a different manner. So basically, if you consider the living book only as a part of some kind of marginalized identity category, you don't fully see them as human. But when you sit down, you have a talk with them, you learn about their name, you perhaps learn about their life story, their family. you start to attach more qualities into that identity group. And suddenly this living book is not only a book, but it's actually living. So yeah, this was for me very, very, very interesting. And one of the theories that I use was a theory by Maria Lugones, South American scholar who speaks about world traveling. And in this world traveling, people conceptually travel to another person's world, and in that way start to see the other person more as a human being. So I thought it was very applicable here to explain what happens. One of the other interesting findings was re-narration. So what I found was that the platform of the dialogue, it's kind of a place for de-silencing, because it invites the living books to tell their own story. So far, the mainstream society kind of narrates the story for these marginalized identities for them. And now Living Library actually invites these people to speak about their own experiences and their own truths. So they're in this way re-narrating the story, how they're being seen in society. And yeah, one of my participants said, I always want to convey it's okay to be transgender. You can be happy, you can be successful. So take your path and be yourself. So for me, yeah, that's quite powerful. That yeah, you can tell your own story at Living Library. Yeah, the challenges that I earlier mentioned, indeed, the bias of openness, it refers to the fact that the participants that I spoke with, they already were rather open-minded. So instead of reducing prejudice that's really strong, there was already a little bit less prejudice to be reduced. So that was a bit of a challenge. And what I thought it might have to do with is that the living libraries are often held at quite central locations in cities, and also that they're voluntary nature. So perhaps people with the highest prejudices would not voluntarily come to such an event. Another challenge that I found for the prejudice reduction was that the readers, they wanted to choose for living books that they had some kind of familiarity with. So for example, if the reader's relative has a certain kind of rare illness, then that person might actually want to talk to a living book who has that same condition. So therefore, they also don't hold so much prejudice to start with, but they are very curious and they want to learn more about it. Yeah, these were, of course, yeah, my findings from 7 interviews, so they cannot and should not be generalized. But yeah, there are some openings and windows into, yeah, what can be looked into more in the future. And as my last slide, I want to, yeah, talk about 2 surprising findings that came from the challenges. So basically, what I found was that the readers actually very strongly benefited from having conversations with the more familiar living books. And this was because these dialogues were very emotional, they depth, and people felt. Can you hear me?
We can now. You were gone for, I think, a second.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the readers really benefited from having these conversations because they were very emotional, and they felt like they can really understand and support each other in challenging conditions. And therefore, the feelings of peer support, connectedness, and also understanding towards the self were really enhanced. And also another finding was that the way Living Library is designed, it really is designed to facilitate very meaningful conversations. And these kind of conversations don't easily happen in everyday life. And therefore, the living books as well as the readers really appreciated having these conversations, which they felt are lacking in everyday encounters. So basically there was a lot of findings and very little time. I hope something will stick with you. What I found is that the dialogue is very meaningful, both for the readers and the living books. And it brings out not only prejudice reduction, but also peer support and connectedness. That's it. If you have any questions, please ask. Oh.
Thank you very much, Lilja. Does anyone have a question? If so, please raise your digital hand or physical and hope that I can see it. Yes, Ivan.
Yes, I was listening to what you were saying about the kind of how people who read living books are affected. And I was thinking, based on what you heard from the reader's perspective, how would you like motivate people to have this meaningful experience? What do you think is a message that would really click and resonate with them and would invite them to read, especially people who might not be very open-minded and might be just passing by, but would actually benefit from this meaningful experience?
That's a very good question. I grappled a lot with the fact that how can we motivate people to read books that they're not familiar with, or how can we invite people who might hold more prejudice to the intervention. But what I also kept in mind that there are volunteers and living books who come voluntarily and also share very vulnerable stories. So I feel like it's a very gentle balancing act between inviting as many people and motivating people who really could use this kind of intervention and still making sure the space is safe for the books to share their stories. So I feel like perhaps hosting them a little bit more in diverse locations, which is already being done. Different libraries, smaller, bigger. Also, promoting perhaps in places that perhaps older people visit, not only in social media. These are some things, while then keeping very keeping an eye out for the space to stay safe. And another thing was that I was already discussing with Martijn, but perhaps at the promotion table, the promoter could also, if the reader is wondering which book to take, whether to take someone that they already know a little bit about or whether to go for something new, that the promoter could also say, hey, why don't you speak to this person that you don't know anything about? So just like gentle nudging while not forcing anything, of course.
All right, thank you, Ivan and Lilja. Does anyone else have questions or comments for Lilja? Martijn? Julia. Sorry, Martijn, I'm going to do Julia first. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing this with us. I was wondering if you talked with the readers about what they actually talked about in the conversation. So did they talk about more commonalities, differences, or about discrimination experiences and so on? And did that change? Actually, the second question would be if there were any differences between the people, and if you could also see differences there in how people reported that, how that changed their perspective, basically.
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's actually as my future research recommendation, looking into the what is actually included in the talk. I didn't have the time to use this as an indicator or look into it further. I think the general kind of understanding is that if it's a positive interaction, whatever the content really, then the perception can change. So if they just feel comfortable with the other person and they maybe have a laugh and a joke, it doesn't so much matter what exactly they talk about. But this is just me speaking from more like it's not scientific what I'm saying, it's more my understanding of it. But I think definitely would be very interesting to look into what is being said and what is being discussed, because there's also a variety of living books who all do the dialogue in their own way. Some people share more about their experience, some people ask the readers questions, some people always wing it, seeing how it feels with the reader. So it definitely differs, and I think it also differs in the outcome. So very, very interesting, but didn't have the space to look into it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lilja. Martijn, we have time for one more quick question.
All right, yeah, it can be just short. Yeah, previously it was discussed that people being already open, maybe that they would have less prejudices. And I'd just like to add that it's maybe my opinion is that sometimes the people who think that they don't have any prejudices sometimes actually have the most prejudices. So that they think they are so open, and in the meantime they are making a lot of bad jokes, or yeah, I don't know. That's just also something to consider, I think. Lilja, if you like, you can respond, of course.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very true. And I wish I would have had space for more interviews, because I feel like, the readers that I spoke with, felt rather open-minded, but there's a lot in between. So I think we're all part of these social structures, and we all carry them in us. So we have a lot of blind spots, and I think the Living Library is a very good intervention to also show us our own blind spots and learn from them. So I agree, Martijn.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Should you have any more questions or comments for Lilja that you didn't get to this time, you can also ask after all the researchers are finished. Up next, we have Leia, and she will talk about Living Library in schools. Good luck, Leia.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. I don't have a presentation, so I hope you don't mind looking at my face for 10 minutes. I just finished my study social work in Holland in Dutch. So I tried to translate everything, but some things may not be correct. Forgive me, please. My study was aimed at youth. So my thesis had to be about children and their development. So I immersed myself in theories and models about developmental psychology and thought about how social workers can make an impact in the working field. So I'd like to tell you a bit about my motivation for choosing to base my research around the Living Library. In the past, I joined the Living Library events for adults, the events that Lilja and Öykü, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name right, talked about. And the events were for adults. So I joined as a book myself with the title Teen Mom. And from the first moment I joined the Living Library, I was already impressed by this organization and the message they want to convey to reduce prejudices in the world. When I noticed that I could also contribute by sharing my story, it gave me a lot of satisfaction. Or like Lilja said, it made me feel powerful. So this was 1 year before I started my study, but even then I already started to think about the advantages if we aimed an event like this for youth, at children, instead of only adults. So when I started my study and learned about development, I saw even more advantages to organize a Living Library event for children. One of these advantages is that children are a future society. So if we can teach them to accept each other the way we are, we can teach them to live in harmony. In that way, the focus is on preventing problems instead of solving them. And I believe where focus goes, energy flows. So this gave me enough reason to collaborate with the Living Library. At first, I thought I had to create something for children myself, but coincidentally, the Living Library already started a pilot for primary schools. One of these events, they worked with a special program designed for children, and this is the first time they were going to test this. which is why my thesis and our collaboration was a really good opportunity for both of us, a win-win situation. I had the perfect assignment and they had a chance to reflect on how the pilot was going, besides their own feedback forms. So we started to collaborate with the focus on the impact of the pilot on primary schools. In that way, I didn't have to design something new, but I could work on an advice. That brings us to my research in the target group, because the next step in this process was to start designing a research question. Because my school assignment, I had to focus on the quality of life and living together. So my main question had to answer how social work can improve living together. With an event like the Living Library, it made sense for me to focus on inclusion, which is a big influence of the quality of living together, of course. And for the Living Library, I had to answer what they can improve or already doing to make that impact through primary education. That being said, my research question became, how can the Living Library effectively contribute to inclusion through primary education to improve the quality of living together? After this, my research began. I joined the Living Library events at primary schools and observed the conversations. I interviewed the children from age 10 to 12 and their teachers, and I also spoke with several living books who joined the events. So I have two quotes. One is from the student, a boy from, I think, 11. He spoke to a book that's with the title Depression. And he said, at first he thought that depression was something dark and people would like dark colors. And now he said he understands that it is a kind of illness and you can get better. And yeah, I think that's exactly the point of the whole Living Library, just to make the change in the mindset. And the teachers said it was nice to see our students working together on these teams, because mostly they see them working on school assignments, and this shows them another side of their students. So I think that's a really nice thing too. But to get a valid outcome, I also interviewed the organizers of the Living Library at primary schools, because their input was important for the research and advice, but I also asked them for feedback. So this feedback was to ensure the reliability and validity of the advice. And the outcome I ended up giving to the Living Library to improve their events for children. Okay, girl, sorry. So I first weighted the pros and the cons, I'm sorry, against each other, as have the period which within the solution can be achieved. Based on this, it's recommended for the organizer to expand the evaluation moments after a Living Libraries event at school. Benefits of the expanding the evaluation after a few weeks are that it evaluates the effectiveness of the Living Library and increases and strengthens the working relationships between Living Library and the teachers, and enables them to better tailor their offering to the students. An extra evaluation moment after 4 weeks can help to measure long-term effectiveness and determine whether discussions in class have taken place about the topics of the Living Library. It also have disadvantages, and that is that it takes a lot more time to carry out an evaluation. And it's also a risk that the evaluation is not fully representative for all students who visit the Living Library, because not all students can participate in the evaluation. To limit the time and research, the Living Library can choose to measure only the most important aspects, such as signals that have emerged. To ensure that the evaluation is representative of all students, it's important to involve as many students as possible. So the Living Library can choose to reach out more students by sending an online survey. to everyone. So that was about my research, but I would like to end my talk to the organizers of the Living Library at school, because during my research period of 6 months, we kept close contact, and I thought it was very pleasant. It was nice to work with the Living Library, and I'm grateful for the opportunities they have given me. This makes me even more enthusiastic about the organization than I already was. So a really big shout out. You guys make the world a better place. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Leia. See some applause for you. Thank you. Does anyone have a question or comment for Leia? Sorry, is it Leia or Leia?
Leia. Yeah,
Leia, right? Okay. I'm starting to doubt myself. Martijn?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for trying to speak English, and it's actually very well. So I would applaud you for that. I have a question. Did you at some point think that maybe the children were too young to handle a living library? Because that might be an opinion of some people, that they say, well, living library, very nice, but it's maybe better for adults instead of children. And we have set the age at minimum 10, I believe.
Yeah.
So maybe 9, but what is your opinion maybe on the age?
Yeah, the last 2 classes of the primary school. I think the age is very good, because they are our future society. So if you want to make a difference, you have to start very young. And if you learn at a young age that it's okay to be different, then I think, maybe some teams, because if you have sexual things, maybe it's not suitable for kids, but then you can make the title something that's suitable for kids. So a more general theme, like social anxiety or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe did you have something to add? I think I heard you. No? Anyone else have a question or comment for Leia? All right, then thank you very much, Leia. Should you think of something else after this, you can wait till the end of the symposium and ask your questions then if you still want to. So thank you, Leia.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Charissa, and Charissa has done a process evaluation on the Living Library that she can tell us about. So once again, she will speak for 10 minutes, after which there is room for questions and comments for her. So good luck, Charissa.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. I'm Charissa. I study applied psychology at Leiden. And for my last year research, I did a process evaluation from the Living Library. I'll start a bit with a background for myself. I started with the Living Library as a volunteer because I really liked the concept. I heard it through my studies. And since then, I just stayed and loved the Living Library. Let me share my screen with you. I hope everybody sees it.
I can't see a screen yet.
Oh, this is...
Yes, there we are. Now we can see it.
Okay. So I did a process evaluation. We heard a lot about the impact of the Living Library and about the conversation itself, but not so much on the full event and everything that goes behind it, which is important to understand if it really does what it says it does. So the goal of Living Library is reducing prejudice and promoting understanding of people most exposed to prejudice, whether related to gender, sexuality, health, disability, social status, ideology, profession, or lifestyle. And my research question was, to what extent is the process of Living Library followed, and what do supporters and readers need to follow this process properly? I did a bit of preliminary investigation because I needed to understand a bit more about the complete process of the Living Library. And the Living Library is more than just only the conversation at the event itself. It also makes use of system innovation. That's a theory of Karel van Berken and Anu Manicum. I'm not sure if I pronounced them right. They also influence social norms. And last, the biggest one, they have an empathy conversation, which makes the most impact. If I can tell a bit more about the system innovation, it's a theory that if you have a complex problem, you need to work together with other groups, other people, in order to innovate and change the problem. You need to have a goal together, and you need to incorporate smart interventions. And there comes the Living Library as a smart intervention in order to reduce prejudice. And the Living Library works together with the organizers of libraries itself, but also other communities of gay communities and other people who've had to deal with prejudice. So it's big. I had like 5 sub questions, and I'll just say them. Which parts of the Living Library have not been implemented, and why? To what extent is the Living Library successful in recruiting supporters locally, and what do organizers need in recruiting locally? Are the conversations carried out according to plan, and what makes it happen/not happen? Is the process for influencing the social norm being carried out according to plan, and what makes this happen/not happen? What is the appreciation of readers, books, volunteers, and partners of the intervention? So if we look at the full process of the Living Library, we start off with a meeting of the organizers, of people who want to have the event within their library or within their local place. Then we have a recruiting of books and volunteers, and when books are recruited or books can volunteer to be a book, they will have an intake conversation with one of the organizers, and then will be placed inside the system to become a book or volunteer. Then you have a follow-up meeting with the organization. You have promotion. It's not really a step in between, but it's more a side thing. Then you have a preparatory, I cannot pronounce this, meeting for books and volunteers 1 week before the event. And then we have the event itself, which starts with the briefing, starting with the local speaker, then the conversations, a group photo, and an evaluation at the end. I did not finish my research yet, so these are results I have so far. I conducted the evaluation of Bijlmerplein in Amsterdam and Zuidplein in Rotterdam. And I used focus groups because throughout everything that I could find within Living Library, there were a lot of things that were quite clear, but not really explained why or explained how. So I really wanted to have a qualitative research to really ask the books and volunteers on how it works, what they do, and why they do it, and what they need to do it exactly according to plan. And the most important thing that I saw was that the recruiting of the books were not with both not really locally done by the organizer, which is one of the points that the organizer needs to source the books a bit locally. So it has to do with one of the key aspects of the Living Library, that it needs to be voluntary, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to have a safe atmosphere, and it needs to be locally. But that does not really happen. Most of the time, the Living Library uses its own list of books and recruit them instead of having really locally sourced books. Both had some missing in promotion of the events, which is also done by the organizations. And with Belmarplein, the preparatory meeting was not held because they worked with a lot of older books that already had done a lot of events. And most of the times when that happens, it doesn't make any sense to have a meeting 1 week before because there's nothing new to tell. A big thing that I really got that was positive, that every book, every volunteer, every reader that I've spoken to so far has a very high appreciation of the Living Library. Everyone loves it, everyone talks about it, and they really share it with other people around them. And they also tell that they wanted it more to be promoted. That they did not think that they did not heard of it before they went to the event, or that they were surprised that no one was talking in their neighborhood about these events because they couldn't stop talking about it. So to conclude, from the results I've got so far is that most parts of the Living Library have been implemented according to plan. The Living Library does work a bit locally, but not as much as they could. The conversations also work according to plan because everyone loves it. And the influencing of the social norm was a bit minimal, and I think I need to explain that a bit more. From the influencing of the social norm that happens through having a local speaker that talks about reducing prejudice, just having the Living Library a bit introduced and why it is good to go to Living Library. So from the results I've got so far, I would say that the Living Library could become better at promoting and working together with the organizations and how to promote best for the locals that they want to reach. And a second thing that I would advise is maybe to have a training separate from the events. So new books can really have the feeling and inclusive feeling and have the safe atmosphere of being introduced to the events without having the risk of not having those meetings because they're in a group with a lot more older books that do not need to have those meetings. So that's my talk so far. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Charissa. Actually, if there aren't any questions, I already have one. Oh, Lilja does too, I can tell.
Okay.
Well, I actually noticed a little bit of a parallel with Öyky's research and yours, where you say that people that volunteer for Living Library can't stop talking about it and sharing it with everybody when Öykü found that visitors of the event aren't really tempted to share it as much. Do you think there could be an explanation for that you maybe stumbled upon in your research?
Not something that I stumbled upon in my research. I do think because the talks I had with the books that wanted to talk to me probably be the ones who are most enthusiastic about a living library, because I was at the evaluation table telling about my research and wanting to have a full conversation with them, and you need to be motivated to have that conversation. And I think probably that has something to do with just having to fill out a form instead of having a full conversation with me. So
Right.
probably that would be why the books of the readers I spoke to would be more enthusiastic and would be more about talking to other people than the other ones.
All right, thank you so much. Lilja.
Yeah, I was wondering about you spoke a lot about like recruiting and sourcing locally. Did
Yes.
you also mean the living books or just the start speakers, or like which ones would you want to cooperate locally, and what is the benefit? I'm just very curious.
Both. First of all, because that is something that Living Library strives for, to actually work locally, to work together with local organizations. But for the speaker, it really is a big impact if you, when you look to reducing prejudice, it has more impact if someone of your own in-group telling you about prejudice and how to reduce them, telling about their own experience and how they reduced it. So having a local speaker that talks to the readers about why they are going to visit the Living Library, or why they want to have those conversations, makes a huge impact, because it's someone they view as someone of their in-group, someone they that's
can
part of
relate
their
with.
group. Yeah.
Okay, no, cool, that makes a lot of sense.
So maybe that also answers the question of even earlier, if you want to look more into people who have more prejudice, how can you make them actually read books? It probably has to do with influencing the social norm a bit more, and having someone really local, known, talking about that, having a promotion within a local paper about someone local talking about that, of the in-group and not someone of the out-group. So it helps to have conversations with someone of the out-group, but if you really want to get people to get to those conversations, you need someone of the in-group to talk about it.
Thank you. Julia.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm very interested in actually the experience of the books. So thinking about that, disadvantaged groups, usually they encounter much more often privileged groups, right? And have to explain themselves a lot over and over again. So I was wondering, you mentioned that they say they have really positive experiences, these books.
Yeah.
I was wondering if they mention also that they're feeling also exhausted from these experiences because they're in this position of explaining a lot. And if they mentioned anything that they're in need of, like some additional, providing some additional services to maintain their well-being and so on, or was that not mentioned from the books at all?
Are you talking about the books? If it's cognitively very like a lot for them to have such an event, to explain themselves constantly?
Yeah, because in day-to-day life, they're anyways experiencing this a lot. And I know they're volunteering to explain it, but I was wondering, because they're having all these conversations and explaining over and over themselves and so on, if it might also get exhausting for them, and if they're in need of
Yes
having
and
like
no.
some space for well-being.
There was one book that talked about it, but they all love it so much that they feel like they actually contribute to something, that it outweighs how much energy it costs. Like the motivation to do such thing outweighs it a bit. And on the events itself, they can actually just talk to one of the matchmakers and say, like, I'm a bit exhausted now, I need to finish. And that's also okay, because that's part of the living library, that they can just be themselves and talk and have the safe environment to say it's too much now.
I think Ingrid can maybe give a first-hand perspective, because she is a living book.
That's
Oh,
right. Yeah. And it's out of your research, but it's my experience.
Yeah.
Since 2015, I am a member of Living Library and I'm a living book. In my experience, you get energy from the conversations, and you cannot stop talking. Every conversation is different, so every conversation has a different energy. Sometimes you get tired. Not every conversation is as smooth as the other. And what I heard from other books is that they get energy out of it. Of course, it depends on your topic. If you have high sensitivity as a topic, then you get, because of all the influence, you get more tired because of all those people, and then they have to take care of themselves and take a break. But usually it just gives energy to have the conversations, because you are contributing to something valuable, but also you know there is so much work to do. People are not aware of their assumptions usually. And before you were talking about the people who do have prejudice, well, I don't know how to say it really. How can we invite the people who do have more prejudice? I think, and you're talking about in and out groups. I think everybody has an in and an out group. In some way, you are an in group with, the people in my street, that's my in group. An out group, yeah. Most people have hair, so in that area, I'm in and out group. So we all have in and out groups where we belong to, and I think it's a good idea to bring people together with a similar background somehow, like a football team or something. And within a football team, or not one team, but football in general, there are so many different people, so many different groups where they can belong to. So maybe then, yeah, you have to have one thing similar. Is that clear? Because in English it's a bit difficult to explain.
Doing great, Ingrid, don't worry. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay.
I can see Leia in the chat is also agreeing that it was her experience as well, that you gain energy from it, and it is a different way to look at your own story. And Anka says that some books limit the amount of conversations they have per edition because of energy levels, which is also a perspective that is there, of course, and that a lot of books share with her. So thank you, Anka and Leia, for sharing that. We're going a little bit over time on the question round for Charissa, but since we are kind of talking about a more general topic, I think we can just keep going because the panel discussion is next anyway, so we kind of naturally rolled into it, if that's all right with you guys. So I think Lilja was next. What did you have to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that I had the same concern as Julia, and that was my third research question. And so in the third chapter of my thesis, I'm really diving into this, and I found, just like echoing statements that perhaps the living books who already come to volunteer, they are maybe a little bit further in how they feel with their story. Perhaps they have processed it with themselves, with their family, a little bit more, that it's not as difficult always to share. Of course, it can be very difficult still, but most of the living books I spoke to for, and they all felt it as a very activist thing, and that it gave energy, and that they felt it was so important even if they felt tired. So I had the same concern, but after the talks, it really I didn't have that concern so much anymore. So if you want to check out the last chapter, I speak more about it.
Thank you, Lilja. Sasha and Mila had something to add.
Yeah, I thought maybe I could share my experience as a book as well, because for me, I get drained very much. But as everyone says, it's so important, and it is a positive feeling. But for me, I have autism, and I'm very sensitive. And I did living libraries with the children. And in every group, there's at least one child who can relate, and who I have a conversation with one-on-one after we have the group conversation. And I just automatically tune into their feelings. And I believe then we have 4 conversations, so it has more impact. After that, I'm completely empty. I have a headache. I have to take 2 days to recharge myself. But as everyone says, it's so important, and you get energized, but for me, not in a way like, oh, I have enough energy. So I think there is more to talk about, or to maybe to research within all the books, if they need any sort of service afterward. But I'm not having an answer on what that would be. But I think some of the books, it's difficult, but they find it so important to join anyways.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, Sasha. I think something that a lot of books can also relate to, from what I've heard from working, of course, with quite a large group of living books as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ivan, you had something to add?
Oh, I wanted to expand more about the sourcing voices from the local community of in-group, some in-group people. In Lithuania, we sometimes make events in really small towns, several thousand people. And I think sometimes it may be really dangerous for people to open up and become visible in the small community if it's unsafe. And they may become like targets for outrage or some reactions. So we have been kind of afraid to do that, but maybe, I don't know, do you have some thoughts about that, how to involve people from within group, but do it safely? Or because if people are coming from another city, then they're like detached, and it's quite safe to be detached, but maybe the impact is not as much. What do you think? Like, it's an open question for someone who would like to react.
Larissa, I see you raising your hand. You're muted, Charissa.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I have the answer to that question because I don't know your current position and how dangerous it could be. But you can always search for local organizations and local interventions and ask around how they are doing that. So you can learn from them within your own city. And second, it's not like a set rule that all the books have to be locally sourced, and that's not always possible. So you can have people from different cities to talk about these topics if it's too dangerous. But if you really want to have those local people, I would say just try to reach out to local organizations and talk with them on how they see it. Yeah.
Thank you, Charissa. Anke, did you have something to add to this conversation?
Yes, I think it's a good add to know. I am a book and I'm talking mostly about child abuse, and I want to protect my parents in this story. So that's why I choose to work on a different name. Anka is not my real name. So if I'm doing Living Library in my own community, people don't immediately know it's me. They see me when they choose this topic, and then somebody's going to get me, and then they see it's me, and then I can tell the story behind it. So my parents still will be protected because there is a thing about the story why they did what they did. So maybe that's also something you can use in Lithuania. Do not use your own name, and that will keep you safe. And because I'm more open about it, last week since last week I'm on the website actually, but that's only after 2 years of doing this and making sure I feel safe for my parents. So that's maybe an answer to your question.
Very much, Anke. That's, I think, valuable advice to give in this situation. I think we're gonna end with Öykü, and then we're gonna go to panel discussion. So no pressure, Öykü.
I think it's very context dependent whether a local person would be more effective. But I've also read and heard from other books that just getting in contact with a stranger who has a similar issue to someone you know can be helpful as well. Because, for example, if it's your own daughter or your husband or a friend, it may be more difficult to discuss because it gets more personal. But I've heard from other people that they, for example, someone had the kidney issues and they talked to someone in the Living Library about it, and then they were more easily in contact with their daughter about it and were more supportive of it. Similar stories are like talking to an ex-drug addict helps someone get more in touch with their son who was still using or was about to quit, something like that. So I think that's also interesting and important to mention.
Thank you very much. Martijn. Make an exception. You're muted, Martijn.
Thank you. Yeah, just very shortly, is that next to using another name, we can also always decide not to make photos of that person. That particular book can also more sit in the back, not being so visible, can be in a corner, can be in a special room. One of my books in Groningen where I started, he's still participating since the very beginning as an ex-addict, and he never wants to be in any news media or anything. He doesn't want to be in the front, he doesn't want to be mentioned, but he loves the conversations, and that's so nice, but in the back. Also, bigger point regarding safety is that everybody should also sign up. matchmakers are always closed, so we always keep an eye on the books as well, and we know who's inside. That's also important regarding safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Martijn, for that addition. Anka is mentioning what's it called? Orange juice. That is sorry?
Oh yeah, you please tell.
That is her safe word with her matchmaker. So if she asks her matchmaker, can I have a glass of orange juice? That means please end this conversation now. I don't feel comfortable and or safe. So that's also something that books and volunteers can discuss with each other. I think, yeah, of course, safety is quite a high priority with subjects that can be vulnerable like this. So everyone kind of thinks of their own things. And we, of course, like Martijn said, have a lot of ways to ensure that we know who comes in and out, and we know that our volunteers are safe. So I think that's all to be said about that topic for now. Thank you all for your input and your opinions and your ideas. Really nice to hear all of you speak up. Up next, we have a panel discussion, meaning that our 4 researchers will enter a dialogue with each other about a question that we are going to ask them. Should you have, as a listener, strong opinions about this, of course, you are welcome to raise your hand. And if there's a lull in the conversation, I might just call on you. So to our researchers, I would love to ask if any of you found anything unexpected during your research that you would like to share with us.
I think I can quickly start because I found, I spoke about it already a little bit, but indeed the aspect of peer support and connectedness, I think that came up in almost all of the conversations, both from the side of the living books and the readers. So in general, many people also said because it's a total stranger, somehow you feel like you can open up and you can speak about very vulnerable topics, and you can, for example, if your, let's say, brother has substance dependency, perhaps it's very triggering and traumatic to speak about it with your own community, but with an ex-addict who has gone through the same thing, it can be very healing, and it can give a lot of support, advice, just comfort. So this was something that the Living Library doesn't yet promote as much on the website, but this is definitely like a surprising and also very good finding, I feel.
Thank you. Any of the other researchers have anything to add to that?
It wasn't significant statistically, that's why I didn't mention it, but I basically, on the behavioral dimension, I measured whether people were intending to share their experiences and whether they actually shared it. And although it was not significant, when people said yes more, they didn't do it. So people who said, yes, I will share these, were more likely to not share, which I found interesting. But there is something in behavioral psychology called intention behavior gap. So a lot of the time, the gap is not filled. We all intend to do certain things, certain responsibilities, certain hobbies, but then certain steps are missing. So then it isn't carried out. So I thought that was interesting, because I do know people are enthusiastic to share, although but the findings didn't necessarily show so. But I've spoken to people, and I do know from other research that they are very enthusiastic about sharing. And a lot of people did share, but it was just interesting that the intention was like negatively correlated with each other.
Very interesting. Humans are weird sometimes. Lilja, did you have anything to add?
Maybe just like a funny remark, like Öykü, do you think if you didn't ask them if they're going to share, do you feel that maybe they would have shared more? Like, do you think that intention made them share less?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. And it's, of course, impossible to guess because the context is very different and I don't know who they've spoken to. But yeah, they might have felt some sort of pressure to share after they said they were going to, and maybe were more conscious about it and were looking for the opportunity, and the opportunity didn't come because this is something that usually comes up naturally in a conversation. It's like, what did you do last weekend? Oh, I went to Living Library. Oh, how was it? And then you share. But maybe because of that question, they planned it or something. But that is completely my theory. So yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, or it is like with procrastination, like when you plan to do something and you already told someone you plan to do it, it feels like you've already checked the list instead of actually doing it.
And Leia had something to add.
Yeah. Well, you asked for something unexpected, and I spoke with children, of course. So I joined the event with adults, and what I saw is that children are asking very other questions than adults. So children are more curious and open to. They really want to know what's behind it, and I saw with adults that they really asking question throughout the prejudices. You know what I mean? They already have an idea of the title of the book or how alive. They already experienced something with that title, and they ask questions through their experience. And kids don't have a lot of experience yet, so they really are curious what's behind the person, and it's a whole lot of it's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Can you give an example of a question a kid might ask and an adult might ask?
Well, my title was Teen Mom. So I noticed that a lot of adults saw Teen Moms, the program from MTV, and they ask a lot of questions about drama, stuff like that, and what my parents would think. And kids are more from the child behavior. So, but you were 14, and were you going to school then? And who made your dinner? And stuff like that. And yeah, adults are more from the programs and what they saw.
Thank you very much, Leia.
No
Does
problem.
anyone have anything to add to that or something else that might have come up? See shaking hands. We also wrote down the question again for our researchers, but feel free to weigh in if you want to. According to you, what makes a living library successful? What does an event need to be successful?
Contact, right?
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I think Ivan, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name not right, said it already, that the contact theory is what the Living Library is working with. So I read about it, and it's a lot for me to explain the whole contact theory. But I think if you come in contact with someone, you have another view of how someone gets through life, and that it's not only the title that makes a person. A person is more than that, and you only can find it out if you have a conversation with someone and you can ask things. I think, in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was just
I'd
gonna
like
call
to
it.
add on that, because contact theory is like the main thing of Living Library, but what makes Living Library successful, in my opinion, is more the vibe of Living Library when you go to the event. and have that contact in a very safe setting where you can feel you can actually ask everything. So it's not only the contact, but it's also the sense and the whole openness of the event that actually is like the main thing that I think is the core thing that makes it successful.
Yeah, the
So,
key.
Yeah,
to
the
make
key to make
Yeah.
make it successful. On top of the contact theory, which is the main thing, having the safe and open vibe really helps.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe to add to these 2 points, I think it's very valuable when it's being promoted that you're free to ask any questions, and also maybe difficult questions or embarrassing questions. And I spoke to a living book with the title of Sex Worker, and he said that sometimes he feels a little bit frustrated that the adults definitely, he can feel they have prejudice and they would like to ask a lot of questions, but they also feel a little bit ashamed to maybe ask those difficult questions. And what he said is, it's so important to recognize those feelings and just actually ask them, because then you can move forward in the conversation. So I think braveness from the side of the books to handle these questions, and also braveness from the side of the readers to actually recognize they have those prejudices is very important.
I think that might tie in with what Leia said about kids asking more straightforward, honest questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Charissa.
Yeah, I wanted to get on top of on that again, because one of the readers told me that she had a conversation with a book that started, "You can ask me everything. Lay all your prejudice on the table. It doesn't matter. Just ask me what's on your mind." And that really helped her. She told me that having a conversation start with, "You can ask me everything. You do not have to be ashamed," helped her to really be direct with the things she thought, because she felt like she could ask those questions that were kind of shameful to ask, in her opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. Öykü.
Yeah, about the vibe of the living library also, there's a lot of things in contact theory, as a lot of people suggested, there's certain conditions that needs to be provided, or positive effect. But I think a lot of the interventions, these kinds of contact interventions included in literature, are very in experimental setting because they are for research. But with living library, it feels more casual and personal, I feel like, and it is a very open setting. The books kind of hear about it from somewhere and then come, and then the readers just stumble into the library and decide to just have a conversation. And the fact that it's really open and there's not really any strict rules is, I think, also what makes it successful and very easy to, if you have any prejudices, confront them with.
Thank you. Ingrid, I think I saw you raised your hand. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I changed my mind, but I do have something to add. Well, I think adults are very biased because they are taught that they have to be polite. So in that way, they think they are ashamed to ask questions. They have learned that they shouldn't. And it depends in what country you are, because I work with a lot of nationalities. And in some countries, it's not done to ask any questions. In other countries, it's okay to do that. And then you have individual differences. But I experienced too, and when the researcher, I forgot the name, he said it is important that at the beginning of the conversation that you invite the reader and reassure the reader that they can ask anything. And I always say, sometimes maybe you ask questions I don't want or I cannot answer. It's my responsibility to say that, because I'm the one who feels if my my privacy it's too private. I can feel it. You cannot assume that for me because you don't know me. So it's my responsibility to ask a question or to answer a question or not. So feel free. And well, that helps. And well, it was already said, so but I can confirm it.
Thank you very much. Martijn?
Yes, I think key to the living library is also that people can choose their own books. So recently, some people have suggested that, for example, in companies, we can maybe assign books to the readers, that they have a group of readers, and then the book is going to sit there, or they're coming to the book or whatever, without a choice. And that, on one hand, seems very interesting, because maybe they would sit together with a book that they would normally not even choose, that they would find scary maybe, but that of course is also at the same time the problem. If it's too scary, they can feel blocked, and they would go into some negative feelings. So in the end, I don't think we should do that. I think choice is actually important, that they choose a book that they are comfortable with. And yeah, that's for now my conclusion.
Thank you. Marijke, I saw you posted something in the chat. Would you like to kind of tell us about what you said?
Yes, I'm sorry, my English is not very good.
Don't worry.
But we are organizing, we are also making a living library, and we feel that the books are also opening, and sometimes first they have the first experience to talk about the topic they want to share with people. So for some books, it's very empowering for themselves to talk afterwards with their closest family about the topic they have an issue with. So I wanted to know if in the survey there's something about how the books our evaluation is about the living library and how it helps with their own lives.
I think I can answer your question. If I understand you right, you're wondering if we look into how the books process their conversations. Mm-hmm. So the evaluations that we do, the ones that people fill out, they're purely for readers, so visitors of the event. But after events, we have evaluation sessions with all the volunteers and living books. Usually just go around the circle and let everyone kind of vent what they thought of the day, how they felt about it, a nice moment, which is kind of a way to, I think, for me as an organizer, to see if anyone is struggling with what they heard, or if anyone needs anything additionally to be able to cope with being part of the event, which I would then follow up with, usually in private, if I sense there is something wrong, but that is not something that it can be seen on paper, because we don't have our volunteers fill anything out on paper. Does that answer your question?
A bit, yes.
Did I miss something that you were still wondering?
Yes, I find we have for the books the people who want to be a book, we have a training of 2 days.
Okay.
And sometimes they say it's too early to talk about it in the library. So right. We respect that. They can come and they can do other jobs in the library for us. Sometimes it's a timeout they want. It's all good. But when they go for it and they do it, it's coming out for themselves. It's doing something very special for themselves also, to have the words to talk about their feelings, their emotions about the topic. So that's, for me, is also a very important impact on the library. And
Yes.
I heard it.
Yes, I think I agree with you. I think that's, you might not have heard it because many of our researchers did focus on readers, but of course I didn't do research, but from my personal experience from speaking with books, many find it very therapeutic to talk about their experience, their life story, what they've been through. They say that it helps them, even if it's can be a bit draining in energy sometimes. So I do think that is an effect that I have perceived, maybe not during research, but just conversationally. So I think you're definitely right. But if any living book would like to weigh in, of course, you are welcome to, because you know better than me. Ingrid, do you have anything to say to maybe what Marijke said?
No, I was responding to something what Martijn said, but I can respond to Marijke too, because it's always on the book to feel what is comfortable, or when it is comfortable to share the story. So, well, I don't have much to add to that, but if I may, I wanted to adjust to something that Martijn said.
Right.
Okay, because he said about free choice of readers to choose a book. In my experience, I did some work in companies too, with with Living Library International, in companies, and then the books were not chosen. They were given to one group of managers in that way, and that is good, because managers, they have to deal with all kinds of people. They cannot choose who they have to work with. So if you really want to make contact with your prejudice, then you shouldn't be able to choose your book. So it's better to have a book assigned to you, and that worked very well. It depends on the book. If he or she is not comfortable with that, then you shouldn't do it. But I think if you have a group of readers, is that usually in companies, a group of readers who did not choose you, then you have a different kind of conversation, and it's not maybe about the topic itself, but it's going more in general, and then they learn much more than when they are choosing you sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome.
I see in the chat that Anita agrees with you. Sasha and Mila, I think you wanted to respond to Marijke.
Yeah, I think she also asked something about if you share stories with your family after you have shared something in a library as a book. For me personally, one of my titles is Growing Up with a Parent with psychological problems. And for me, it's I don't talk to that with my mother. I once told her, like, I am speaking about this with children on schools. And her reaction was like, oh, okay, fine. And so I think for some books, it's a conversation starter with people they interact with but didn't speak to before. But for me, it's like more helpful to speak as a book about it than speak with my mother about it afterwards. So yeah, that's just my own experience. And also on the other thing, I want to respond to Ingrid, like at one school we were assigned to a group instead of that they chose us. And for me, it felt really unsafe because some of the people who were in that group were not interested in the topic, or are like, oh, I really dislike this topic or something. So I didn't feel safe to really open up because I could see that they were not interested, or then I found it too personal to say some things instead of a group who really is interested in me and my story. So yeah, just another experience from another book.
Yeah, and I would like to add something. Part of the contact theory is that the people need to be motivated to participate in the contact theory. And when you get a book assigned, then the motivation to choose the subject of the book is gone. So I think we all agree that the contact theory is the basis of the living library, and that's why the motivation is very important. Like, why did you choose this book? What do you want to know about it? So I think that's very important to keep in mind.
I see that, but I also see that in some way you can change the atmosphere from the conversation, but you have to feel comfortable as a book. If you are not comfortable, then you shouldn't do it. But sometimes how do I say that in English? Because they are challenged, then something happens. Because they're not comfortable with the topic, then you get results sometimes. But you have to feel safe for yourself as a book. And I cannot be hurt. I know the people I'm talking to, they cannot hurt me. I don't let them. And they can say anything to me. I won't let them hurt me. So for me, it's quite comfortable to have people against me who do not agree with me. I wish they did, because they always try to protect me, and I don't want that. So do you understand what I mean? Because
I'm gonna interrupt you guys a little bit here. I'm sorry. We are running out of time for the communal part, but we can put you in a breakout group after we end to talk more about this, should you want to. So is that all right to leave it for now? We still have one raised hand. I think I'm gonna end there. Aneta, you had something to add, so you can be the last person to speak publicly here.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to just add one more perspective. I think that as my perspective as an organizer, that Living Library probably is also not only about breaking stereotypes or just about prejudices, but it's also about quality of dialogue and raising up those quality. I mean, what kind of words you are using to describe the reality you are living in or you are facing with. Just not only to changing your mindset, but also about using proper words just to talk about this topic, just to uncover some taboo spheres. And this is what I wanted to add. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you who spoke out, shared your ideas, your opinion. This turned into a really interesting conversation. Sadly, we can't sit here talking all night, but this is the end of the communal part of this symposium. So I would really love to thank our 4 researchers for their hard work and their beautiful presentation of their results. Thank you so much. It was super interesting and inspiring. Exactly. Little applause for you guys. Thank you to everyone who came and who listened, who asked questions. It's so nice to see how many people are interested and inspired by Living Library like me. I feel a kinship with all of you. It's really nice nice to see. So thank you all. So that ends the official part of the symposium, but as I said, there is the opportunity to be put into a breakout room with someone that you want to talk to some more about, or about a certain topic. So should you want to continue a discussion you maybe didn't finish earlier, do you still have a question for a researcher, you have your chance now. So just raise your hand and we will put you in a room of your choosing. If not, thank you again for being here, and have a wonderful night. And who knows, we might see each other in the future.
Maybe I can
thank
add
you all.
one thing.
Oh.
I also would really like to thank you, Eva, for your kind hosting. Really well done. I applaud you like this. And I also like to say to everybody, you can download all the studies that have been conducted via livinglibrary.nl/research. And yes, indeed, I think we close now officially. If you like to go, you can go. And then if you like to stay, we can still have some smaller rooms. You know, we ended officially. We can still chat a bit. If you like to speak with somebody privately, I will put you in that room with that person. You know, something like that, a bit informally, like you would normally go walk out the room and then you still chat a bit, you know? That's kind of the idea. But we end officially, and I thank you very much. I've also stopped the recording.
Bye, and thanks to everyone in the chat saying goodbye. Very nice to see.